Let's bring in our next guest, Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider. Good morning, Bobby. How are we doing today?
I'm good. Good morning. Thanks.
So the Jaylen Brown extension, a whopper, the richest in history. Is this just like the new normal? Is this just a product of continued financial growth? Next man up. If you're at all NBA, this is what you're going to be paid. Or is this deeper than that? Is this something more given to Jaylen Brown this week by the Boston Celtics? What's the read other than, hey, this is how contracts work nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how it's always worked. I mean, if you met the criteria of supermax eligible, meaning that you've earned all NBA in the prior season or in back-to-back seasons, you're usually going to be rewarded handsomely with a new big contract. I mean, every player that's met the criteria has gotten one. Kawhi Leonard is kind of different because Leonard met the criteria, but he has to be traded here. But I mean, you can negotiate it here, but I think with the rise of the salary cap, we were basically stagnant for a couple of years with COVID. The 304 number for Jaylen Brown is based on a 10% cap jumping. Could certainly not be that amount. Could be 285. Could be 290. So it's a little bit of a flexible number there. But yeah, I mean, I think listen, if Boston didn't want to do a Jaylen Brown extension, then they would have been better off just trading him. Because you couldn't go into the season with the player on an expiring contract because the likelihood is that Jaylen Brown would have left in free agency next offseason here. And it's a big number, and you have Jason Tatum the following year, which is, I think, at like 338. So you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision if those two players are your core players to build around. I think with Brown, I think you could always pivot. A year, he can't be traded for a year, but a year from now or 2 years from now, I still think he's got value, even if that number is high, if you do need to move off that.
Were you surprised that the Celtics decided to double down on the Tatum Brown partnership, that duo, after the way that this season and I guess like the theme was going with those two?
No, I didn't, because I didn't know what the alternative was. I mean, it's, you were 2 games away from winning an NBA Finals. A year ago, you were 1 game away from getting an NBA Finals. And I know it didn't end well, but you still have 2 players under the age of, 26 years old in the prime of their condition here. And I always say, every player is tradable eventually. Just because you sign a 5-year extension doesn't mean you're going to be in Boston for the rest of your life. Same with Jason Tatum here. And I think it's a lot easier to extend and then move off than to basically kind of play out the year or look for trade suitors. Are you going to look for draft picks and young players for Jaylen Brown and kind of take it maybe a step or 2 back? So I didn't think Boston doubling down on these players was kind of like a little bit of fool's gold here. I just thought that this is basically this is where we are from a circumstances standpoint based on how the rules work. And as I said, if you ever wanted to move off one of the two, I think you certainly could do down the road.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact when you're talking about the richest contract, when you're talking about $300+ million over 5 years, that is really just following protocol. But that seems like what it is right now, following protocol and spending over $300 million on a player over a half decade. But that is the reality right now in the NBA, which is a good thing if you're an NBA player because, wow, that's a lot of money. But the Celtics, they are doubling down on that tandem, but they did change the makeup of this team this offseason, trading away Marcus Smart, losing Grant Williams, adding Kristaps Porzingis. Do you think that partnership is better insulated now than it was, or is this team maybe due for a little step back despite investing in these two guys, or at least investing in one half of the Tatum Brown partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I think Porzingis is certainly the X factor. I mean, you basically traded Marcus Smart and Grant Williams for Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, I know that you got some draft equity out of it also, but that's probably the best way to look at it. I think a lot of it's going to rely on where Malcolm Brogdon is health-wise. Certainly wasn't healthy in that Miami series, and as you guys saw with that failed Clipper trade, a lot of it had to do with from a health perspective here. So you lose Smart. If Brogdon's not healthy, then you've got to be who's playing point guard for you here, and so I'm not ready to put them up there. I guess certainly we'll talk about Milwaukee and we'll see what happens in Miami with Damian Lillard. But I think they did take a little bit of a step back in that it changed the dynamics of the team with Porzingis. But I'm a big Marcus Smart fan, and I do think they did take a little bit of a step back.
So looking around the league, after, the latest richest deal was signed, the next richest deal will be signed shortly within the next, if not months, certainly next summer. Who's next up? Who's going to be the next one? We're talking about making a ludicrous sum of money in the next richest deal. I saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a fan. We're fans of Shai on this show, of course, given that he's Canadian and he's playing for our team this summer, which is very, very important. But is he the next up? Is someone going to crack $400 million soon? When is that going to happen? Like, where are we going next year in the discussion of richest contracts for all NBA talent?
I mean, it will be Tatum, just because he's already met the criteria. He's got to wait a year because of years of service criteria. But yeah, I mean, Tatum's number is going to be 338. Could be up to 338. That's the max next off season. After that, it's basically, as my colleague Brian Windhorst calls it, the fun max, right? Guys who will sign these rookie extensions, whether it be Anthony Edwards or Halliburton or LaMelo Ball, 260 possibly here. So yeah, Shai's got a little time to wait though. I mean, he's got a couple more years before he can sign that big contract. Yeah, I think it's interesting is that the supermax rules stayed in place, but it made it harder for you to kind of build out teams by paying players a higher payer salary with this new collective bargaining agreement. And I think that's where teams, having three players on big contracts is going to be hard. And I think that's where you might be seeing teams kind of shuffle players around a little bit. Maybe Denver a year or two from now with Michael Porter Jr. here. But yeah, I mean, I think Tatum is the next guy up. After that, we'll be kind of in a waiting period.
I don't know if the specter of Saudi money changes this at all for you. I guess it's something that is looming. It's something that certainly has LeBron James's attention and other players around the league. But let's put that all aside and just talk about the NBA's trajectory. In 10 years, a top 5 player in the NBA who's adequately paid or paid the way they can be, they just signed a contract, let's say. How much is a top 5 NBA player making annually in 10 years?
I would say probably over the life of the 5-year contract, at least $400 million. I would say, the Brown last year is close to 70. So I think you're going to probably see players start at like $75 million, which is ridiculous because I mean, more power to them. But I remember when I started in the league, I think the max was like $8 million. I think that was the maximum salary, and I think it's just the growth of where this, where the league is going to be. There's going to be an influx of new TV money, but they did put a cap in there as far as how much the cap can increase. It can only go up 10% here. But listen, you go up 10% every year from 149 next year to 163. You keep on adding up here. That 5 years from now, you could be looking at a player, potentially making, $400 million.
If you're listening, get your kids in basketball real quick, eh?
Make your free throws.
There you go. We're talking to Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider. Okay, so let's ask you about a hot topic around these parts. Pascal Siakam, still one of the top names in the rumor mill. Of course, he's entering the final year of his current contract, despite being eligible for an extension this summer. So where are you at with the Pascal Siakam rumors, whether he is being floated around as a trade target or not?
Yeah, I think you have to make a decision. I don't think you can go through another an off season next year. Basically, what happened this year with Fred, and and I know there's certainly different players here where you lose a player for nothing. And Fred was different because the extension rules didn't help him, get a big deal in Toronto, and certainly Houston kind of came in and overpaid. I think, listen, Pascal's extension eligible for 192. I think if Toronto wants him part of their future, you put that on the table right now, and if he doesn't want to sign it, then you're certainly going to be looking for trade suitors here. But I just have a feeling that we're going to be going through the same thing we did this past trade deadline, whether it be Pascal or OG or Barry Trent. Players like that are going to be floated around, and I think certainly with a new coach there, I think you just have to pick a direction as far as where you want to go. Is it retooling? Is it rebuilding? Is he the face of your franchise here? But I'd be comfortable giving him 4 for 192. But the big thing is if he doesn't want to go in that direction, or if he doesn't want to sign, then what's the next move here as far as moving off his contract? And then the other thing is that he's got tremendous value around the league, but the reality is he's a player on an expiring contract, and there is certainly hesitancy to go out and make a big move for him if you can't re-sign him. And I think that's where teams would certainly be concerned here. But I think he's a heck of a player, and I think if he is willing to sign an extension, I think that's certainly something Toronto should look forward to do.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation's made a little bit more interesting, I guess, after Jaylen Brown signs the contract that he did. I know Pascal's not in the position Jaylen Brown is in.
Well, here's the thing with Pascal, though. So if he plays out this season and earns all NBA, 5 for 304, that's his number next year. So do you want to take a $110 million somewhat discount off that number? You want to bet on yourself? Would Toronto even offer that? And that's kind of the risk reward that both sides are kind of dealing with.
Yeah, 100%. And I wonder, and I'm thinking about it more. Like he clearly did not put himself in that position to get Jaylen Brown money, not yet. And he's talked about how he wants to be in Toronto. He would be resistant to the trade, at least in terms of, hey, am I going to sign that extension? Part of that, I mean, most of that might have to be that he thinks he's going to be an all-NBA talent, and he could put himself in a better position to make a ton of money. He could make Jaylen Brown money. So I'm thinking about, okay, what Pascal Siakam wants is probably the opportunity to be an all-NBA player. And I'm thinking about, okay, where is that the best spot to do? And I think there's an argument that, hey, if you play for the Toronto Raptors, it's the best chance for you to be in that position. If you get traded, you don't know what your role is going to be. Maybe you're going to be the second best player on that team, but he knows in Toronto he's going to be the best player on that team. Do you think that's part of the loyalty equation here? Or do you think this is just a player in Siakam who wants to be in a position where he can make his own decisions at the end of his contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a loyalty factor, especially from for a team that drafted you. The thing also is that if he's ever traded, the All-NBA criteria goes out the window. Like, he wouldn't be eligible for that big number with his next team here. So that certainly plays into a role there also. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different. Listen, he's been there 8 years. There's a comfort level there. I think certainly what direction this team goes, if they're competitive, I think will certainly play a role in that.
So for you right now, what is the biggest bit of outstanding business left in the NBA offseason? I mean, usually it's frantic. Usually it's, rife with trade rumor and all this stuff going on. Maybe it's been a little quieter this year. Maybe that's a misread, but it just seemed like it just dragged on with Kevin Durant last summer. If there is a bit of outstanding business left this offseason that you expect to be done, is it Lillard? And if not Lillard, what is it?
Yeah, I think it has to be Damian Lillard. I mean, I think we could be, if we're waiting by the phone or waiting for the smoke to come through the chimney on Lillard, we might be waiting for a while here. But I think certainly, August is a funky month just because it's like, I always say, we usually always get married or have babies. That's what teams do, right? Like we're in this kind of like hiatus here. I mean, I get, my wedding anniversary is next week here, and we're kind of in a little bit of a slow period here. And I think usually things pick up closer to Labor Day because players start to report back. There'll be a realization for Damian Lillard, like if he's not traded by September, wait a minute, I'm going to have to report for camp in 3 weeks here or 4 weeks here, and Miami is not my destination, and what happens next year? And so, yeah, I think Lillard is probably the big thing that we're probably sitting. I think eventually he gets traded. I think James Harden is going to be interesting also here because if you're Philadelphia, you're trying to get as much as you can, and I don't think you can get as much as you can for Harden, with that situation. But yeah, I mean, we're in this period where I think most rosters are filled, kind of just finishing touches here. Teams are still digesting this new CBA that came into play right before free agency started here. But yeah, I mean, I think we're casually waiting to see what happens with Damian Lillard. I do think at the end of the day he'll be in Miami. I just don't know, right now what that package would really look like and how many teams, eventually get involved.
Well, happy early anniversary. That'll be exciting for you guys. And so if we're talking about James Harden here, is it the Clippers for you if he does get traded? Is that the best landing spot?
I think so, and I think it's just a matter of how much the Clippers are willing to give up here. They've got all these expiring contracts, and Terrence Mann's been named, a player that's been named, a young player, and they've got some first-round picks. But I said it back in, I guess it was early July here when this was all going on. I think Philadelphia has to realize, like, if you move off James Harden, that you are going to take a step back, and it's going to be a gap year. And is that okay with Joel Embiid? I mean, that's the big thing. Is that and I know people could say, well, when they had Ben Simmons and Simmons sat out, they were 10 games over 500. I just think the roster has changed a lot, and Tyrese Maxey's a heck of a player. But I heard Daryl Morey, their president's interview on, I think, Philadelphia radio here, and he's like basically saying he still views him as, well, he wants him back, and he still views him as an all-star that can bring back a lot in a trade. And I just don't see a landing spot out there where teams are going to give up multiple first and young players here for a player on last year of his contract.
Last one for you, Bobby. I guess it's been, there's been a lot of rumors, but it's been, I guess, a quiet offseason for the Toronto Raptors, aside from losing Fred VanVleet in that big deal with the Houston Rockets. Do you expect anything from them? Do you expect this to sort of be the group that enters training camp and tries to improve, I guess, on last year's season? I mean, they're in a really wonky spot right now, and it seems like not that we have more questions than answers, because I guess Fred did provide some clarity, but still in terms of directions with this team, we are not quite clear yet.
No, and I think, you go out and you get Dennis Schroeder, and it's kind of a stopgap because it's a 2-year contract, and you get McDaniels, who's a big wing, so you kind of, you fill in Grady Dick's, a nice young player as far as you get a shooter here. So I think you're going to be in a major evaluation period for training camp, and I think we'll know a lot more when we get closer to December here as far as what direction this team is going to be. And I think what you see now is what you'll see in late September, early October, but I don't think it's what you'll see probably come February.
Bobby, appreciate you coming on this morning. They got you working late in the summer, working through the anniversary. I mean, it's just, I guess, the price to pay. But we appreciate you coming on this morning for sure, and hopefully we can do this again soon. But we won't bug you in the next couple of weeks.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Talk to you.
That's Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office.
Unless Siakam
insider
gets traded, then we'll bug him.
Then we'll definitely bother
We will call him on his anniversary date night.
I don't think it's happening.
We will call the restaurant, order him a bottle of champagne, and also take him on the phone.
Yes.